This week's guitar lesson is going to be a breakthrough for those of you that struggle with phrasing or what to do with all this information that you've learned. I mean, I know a lot of you know how to play some scales, you know how to play some chords, you have a lot of the basic mechanics down, but when it comes to improvising, if we were doing a blues, for example, you just kind of sound like you're playing the scale. You're going up and down the scale, which is fine, you're technically right, but it doesn't have soul. And soul is something that actually can be taught. I really believe this. I believe it comes from learning phrasing. And phrasing is knowing when to play, when to stop, when to let the other instruments have their say, and all of that. So phrasing is kind of more of a creative approach than a scientific approach. So we're going to learn how to do that with just 6 notes. Actually, it's just 4 fretted notes, and then there's going to be 2 bends out of those fretted notes. So it'll be a total of 6 notes. We're not going to be worried about what scale we're in. We're not going to be worried about chord changes or any of that. We're just going to be focusing on these 6 notes, and I'm going to show you how to play a meaningful lead with 6 notes and with phrasing, and I think this is going to make a lot of light bulbs go off for those of you that have been struggling with this topic. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what we're going to learn, and then we'll break it down. Alright, so it's a simple lead, but you're saying something with it. And that's what I want you to start thinking about doing, is how do you say something with just a few notes, just a few words? How do you say something meaningful? So in this video, we'll go ahead and learn how to play that lead. Now, if you want to download the jam track, I've actually got 12 jam tracks, believe it or not, 12, that go with this lesson. So I've got what we're going to learn in every key. So we're going to be learning it in the key of A. But I wanted to include every key so that you can practice playing all of these phrases in other keys. If you wanted to play it in G sharp or whatever key you want, you can just grab a jam track and it'll be the same jam track, just transposed to a different key. So let's go ahead and break down this lead and talk through phrasing. Alright, so one of the biggest problems I see right now with learning online, any topic, but especially guitar, is overwhelming amount of information. A lot of you are feeling overwhelmed. And what happens, this is sort of human nature, is we start learning one thing, but then we see a shinier object over there and we jump over and we start learning that, and we just are jumping around all over the place. It's sort of like going to a very large buffet, and when you're hungry and you sample a little of this and then you look over there and think, oh, that looks good, and you try a little of that, but you're not actually having any kind of meaningful meal. You're just eating a lot of little things. And so that happens to us musically, I think, with all the information online. And so the point of this lesson is to break it down. We're going to focus on just 6 notes, and we're going to have a meal with those 6 notes. We're not going to worry about scales and scale positions and patterns and all that. We're just going to concentrate on these 6 notes. Let me show you those notes first. Then I'll show you how to find them in any key, and then we'll learn the solo. Okay? So the notes, we're going to start with just 4 of them. So we're actually going to break the 6 down even to 4. You could actually make a very meaningful solo. You can have a meal with just these 4 notes, a great meal. And a lot of artists do this, like B.B. King jumps to mind. But here's the notes. So we're going to start with our middle finger on the 11th fret, 3rd string. Index finger is on the 10th fret, 2nd string. Ring finger is on the 12th fret, 2nd string. So we have 1, 2, 3. Now look at what you've created there. If you can just visualize on your neck, it looks like a little triangle there. That's how I always picture it. Especially if I put my fingers on those strings, I can just see a little triangle. So that's kind of a visual reference. I always like to see shapes and things. I think it just sort of helps. So you have 1, 2, 3, and then if you take the 12th fret, 2nd string, and you do a full bend, you have 4. Those are your 4 notes. Now, a full bend, by the way, that just means you're going to hit the note that's 2 frets higher than the note that you started with. So that's the note you're trying to hit. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what can you do with 4 notes? You can sing with 4 notes. You don't need you don't need to get overwhelmed with scales and where do I jump from. Just find a little corner and get really comfortable with it. That's what I like to do. It's just, you can just relax right here. So we're playing, by the way, I should have mentioned this. This is in the key of A. So everything that we're learning here is all relative to the key of A. And what we have just played with those 4 notes, that's the major pentatonic scale, pattern 4. Now, if you don't know what that means, that's okay. We'll uncover this stuff. But look at it this way. Here's how I think of getting there. So, if we're playing in the key of A, I make my A major bar chord. And then I know where pattern 1 is. And I know most of you know where pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. A lot of minor pentatonic scale folks out there, and that's cool. So minor pentatonic scale would be right there, right? And if you don't know what I mean by that, just check out the blues lead course. I go through all 5 patterns of the minor pentatonic scale. That's all available at activemelody.com for premium members. Okay, so pattern 1 is there. Now pattern 2 is here. Now what's cool about this note right here, that's an A note. Remember, we're playing in the key of A, but that note is also in that little triangle that we just learned. So there's that same note. So look at where it is in reference to pattern 2. That's how I think of getting to this pattern 4 of your major. So you can have this real bluesy sounding lead here, but then you can switch your fingers and have a much sweeter, happier sound just by shifting. They're both sharing that same A note. And that's, that makes sense because A is neither major nor minor. It's just the tonic. It's the root of the key we're playing in. But that's your little happy place, and that's how you can find it. So that way you can practice finding it in different keys. And obviously you've got all the jam tracks, all 12 of them, so you could try it in another key and just try and find that pattern 4 in that little sweet corner, because that's where we're going to be playing. We're going to make a whole solo here. Alright, so now let's break down that lead that I played in the intro. And as a premium member, you have access to the tablature. I should have mentioned that in the intro. And you also have access to the on-screen tab viewer. So that might make it easier to play along and follow along. But let me show you how to count this in. That's always important. So the way that I would count this is 1 and 2 and... And so what we just played there was a little phrase. So when I talk about phrasing, that's just a little word, and so it wasn't a big thing. It wasn't like running up and down a scale. It was just a simple word. I just said something, I said something in context with the key that we're in, so it made sense. But little simple phrases like this are what really make your playing sound professional. It's a lot of misconception that people have, thinking that what's going to wow somebody is playing really fast or jumping from here to here. It's not. It's that, So that's how I counted it in. It's 1 and 2 and, right on the and after 2. That's the first phrase. I don't say anything else. I wait till the jam track goes to the 4 chord. In this case, it'll be the D chord. And then I played another little simple phrase. Now, we're still using those first 4 notes that I showed you. Now, what I did here, I did a half bend. So I've got my ring finger on the 12th fret 2nd string. Do a half bend. That's just hitting that note there. Half bend is just 1 fret above where we start. Do a half bend and a release. Then I come back to the 10th fret 2nd string, and then I conclude there on the 11th fret 3rd string. So, isn't that nice? Just now we've said 2 things. So we have alright, now the jam track goes back to the 1 chord, and then I played really cool 2 bends that don't go anywhere. They bend. It's kind of like singing to me. And so that's why phrasing is so important, because you're creating vocals with your fingers. When you're singing something, you would sing it this way. You wouldn't sing like this, walking up and down a scale. No, you'd have little phrases. So let's learn this third phrase. So we're going to slide with our middle finger up to the 11th fret 3rd string, and then index finger goes down back on the 10th fret 2nd string, and I go between those two. So it's 3, 2, 3. Those are the string numbers. And then I do 2 full bends on the 12th fret 2nd string, and then as soon as I reach the top of that, I just kill it. So I don't let it go. I don't release it. I just go. So now we've got 3 things. So here's what we've said. Here's the 4th thing. That's the next thing we're saying. So we're still in those same 4 notes. So we have 11th fret 3rd string, back to the 10th fret 2nd string, and then I do a hammer on between the 10th fret and the 12th fret on the 2nd string. And then I go back to that A note on the 10th fret 2nd string. So you can see we're just dancing around those notes. So some of it is being creative with the notes. You don't have a lot of variables. So notice that time I did a hammer on. The other time I did a bend. You could do a slide. But it's a combination of those things. And then the vibrato you use. Do you do vibrato at the top of the bend? Or do it's singing. That's the thing. That's what gives you your unique sound, is how you phrase these things. So the 4th time, right here. So now we're switching at this point in the song, going to the D chord, the 4 chord. And I went, and then I repeated it. Let me show you that. So now we're introducing another of those 6 notes. We're gonna do a full bend here on the 13th fret 2nd string. And then as soon as I bend that, I release it without making a noise, so that I can come down to, and I notice my middle finger is already in place there on the 12th fret 2nd string. So I can do a half bend, just like we did in the very beginning, like the second phrase, second lick. So we have that sound. And so by doing this bend, we're bending into the minor pentatonic scale. So you can feel that it changed from happy to sort of more bluesy. It got serious right there. Now the second time through, it's really just a repeat. I just changed the feel of it. I went, so it's a quick bend and then a quick bend again. And then to conclude that, I went, so that goes back down to the 11th fret 3rd string, back to the 10th fret 2nd string, then I do another full bend on the 12th fret 2nd string, back to the 10th fret 2nd string, and then I concluded that time on the 11th fret 3rd string, which would be the F sharp note instead of the A. So it had a different feel. I wanted to land on a different note instead of the A. Alright, so from the 4 chord. And then the song switches back to the 1 chord right there when I did that bend. So we're back to the A. Alright? Alright, so then while we're back at that 1 chord I played, I came back and just did this lick. Same little triangle area. I started on the 11th fret 3rd string and I did a hammer on, pull off. That's between the 10th fret and the 12th fret on the 2nd string. You can see, isn't that nice sounding? You're just singing. So it's getting creative with the little techniques that you have, hammer-ons, pull-offs, bends, vibrato, slides. That's really about all there is. And then those few notes and what you can do with it, how you can make it sing. Hopefully this is starting to make sense, that these little licks are all part of just phrasing in general. You know, how do you phrase something? How do you make it sound meaningful, like you're singing? So it's not just notes. It doesn't sound like a scale. It sounds like you're saying something. All right, let me back up then and play us up to that point. We've covered a lot of information here. We'll start from the 1 chord, from the A, and then we'll work our way up. So we have... There's that lick we just learned. And then at this point in the song, we go to the 5 chord. Now what I played was this little lick, and I love this because it's the same little triangle. The only difference is we're landing, this note is a B note, and so we're landing in a different place. Now most of the time we've been landing on the A, right? But now we're landing on the B. And by the way, you can land on any of these notes in the scale, and it's going to work. Now your ear will tell you, for the most part it's going to work. Your ear will tell you if you need to adjust it. If something sounds wrong, just noodle around till you get your way out of it. But I know that in this lick, anytime you're at a 5 chord, I use this lick all the time. So remember that. That's a big takeaway. Because you can get to that from whatever key you're in. That's easy to find. Works great over the 5 chord, okay? So your 5 chord would be your E chord, and then it goes back to the 4 chord, and I played. I love that too. That's a very kind of B.B. King sounding thing. That's doing that half bend on the 12th fret 2nd string, and then I'm doing a slide up to the same little area here. The only difference is I'm sliding up to this note. So remember I said sliding, that's one of your techniques that can make it sound different. So we're sliding into the note, which is the 11th fret 3rd string, and then we're resolving on that A note again, the 10th fret 2nd string. So we have, that's a great lick. Alright, so let's back up and take it from the 5 chord. There's your 4 chord. And then I played that same bend, that's the 13th fret 2nd string, do a full bend. It's actually a pre-bend release. That means I go ahead and pre-bend it, then play it, release it. Then I come down here to the 10th fret 2nd string, that same A note. And then I conclude that lick with doing it's really a hammer-on and a bend on the 12th fret 2nd string. So it goes. So you can see just with those 3 notes, a lot was going on there. There was a bend, actually it's a pre-bend, playing the note with vibrato, and then a hammer-on with a bend. But you can see how it's got that vocal quality, or at least it does to my ear. Okay, and then to conclude this whole thing, I just went, and that sounded like, I don't even know where that came from. I'm trying to think of who I ripped that off. But that's what I'm doing over the turnaround there. And that's just playing 2 notes out of the triangle, 11th fret 3rd string, 10th fret 2nd string, and I just slid into it. And then it walks up to your 5 chord and then back to the 1. And that's how I like to think about playing solos like this. Now you don't want to always time it exactly the same. So in other words, when I started it, I went. If I did it the same every time, it would start to get boring. Like if I always came in at the exact, in other words, if I waited for the chord, then I played a response, waited for the chord, played a response, that would get old. You can use it sparingly. But again, just think about like kind of how a vocalist would do it. And it's going to take some practice. And how do you learn this stuff? Well, some of it's someone like me showing you how I would do it, but a lot of it is just listening to other artists. How does Albert King do it? I've always been fascinated with his phrasing because it's so elegant. And it's so predictable too. Once you understand his cadence and his style, you can start to hear it in other things, or at least I do. And that's why you have guys like Stevie Ray Vaughan who would gravitate towards that style, because it's just powerful. It's very powerful. So take a listen. That could be a good homework assignment. Once you've downloaded the jam tracks and played along with them and learn how to play this in different keys, listen to Albert King would be a good one. someone like Albert, and how is he doing his phrasing? He's not just playing scales. He's phrasing it. B.B. King's another one. Okay, I hope you've learned something. I hope this has been helpful to any of you that have been struggling with phrasing. And that's what we have this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next week. Oh, I should also mention, if you haven't clicked the subscribe button on YouTube, make sure you do so. I put out new lesson content twice a week, so just hitting the subscribe button will help you stay in the loop.